Sorry, John, for making him wait a little bit. Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show, powered by Electric Bikes of Charleston. Coming up at 12:30 today, Shane Beamer's press conference to open spring practice. Pro timing day is tomorrow, and then Wednesday, the football boys will be on the field for the first time here in the spring of 2025. But John, we'll glad to see you. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We'll lead off with Carolina baseball, letting the series against the Sooners slip away yesterday. Give us your broad stroke thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Tough yesterday. Tough. Big game to lose. Tremendous opportunity. There's only going to be so many of those. I think in this first half of SEC play, you have to be able to win these kind of series if you're gonna be better than what you were projected to be coming into the season. You know, those guys weren't real happy being picked to finish 14th out of 16 teams in the SEC. And, you know, if you're going to be better than that, you got to perform better than that and perform in those kind of moments. And, you know, it was, Oklahoma's a great team. They got a Friday night starter that's going to be a first round draft pick, and you battled them really well. And, you know, I thought offensively you did so much right over the weekend. Just got let down at the wrong times.
Yeah, I think Mike said it a minute ago. I've said it. John, you've said it. It's such a thin line in this league. All right, you're always going to have one or two heavyweights, 3 or 4 heavyweights maybe. Now you got 16 teams, and then you got pretty much everybody else, and they're all really in some way, shape, or form similar. A couple of teams might hit better than others. These teams might pitch better than those. Defensively, this group might be better than that group. There's going to be something that offsets everything, but it's a thin line, and you know when you cross that line, you'll lose. And that's what happened yesterday, late in the ball game. John, let me go back to something I said earlier. Obviously they've moved Becker to the bullpen, and it's hard to transition from starter to bullpen guy for a multitude of reasons. But they used him Friday night. He looked pretty good. I thought yesterday, leaving everything up, he looked a little tired to me. I'm not sure what it was. What were your impressions of Becker getting his second appearance of the weekend in 3 days?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be really difficult to analyze the same pitcher every week after week. You know, that's not fair to Matthew. There are so many other things that go into it than just those walks. Obviously, those aren't a good thing for him, and that's something he's struggled with at times throughout his career. Yeah. But you know, you got to have other pitchers step up. You got to have guys field ground balls. Disappointing moment for him. Friday night he was really good. I can't sit here and say anything about him being tired or anything like that. He threw 24 pitches on Friday night. He's in the best shape he's ever been in before. He's a senior. That shouldn't come out of, honestly, that really just shouldn't come out of anybody's mouth. Hopefully it didn't from anybody over there within the program that he was tired or sore or anything like that. It's just, you just got to go out there and perform.
No. Yeah, I wasn't implying it came from the locker room. That was coming directly from me. I'm just trying to wrap my head around who they are and what they're planning to do here with this staff. You had the 3 starters this weekend, and you had McCoy and Stone, who had 2 innings, obviously, that they would like to have back. But John, they got through them. You know, they got through them. They let them sit out there and pitch, and they got through them. So what is that? Do you think it stays the same as they head to Arkansas this weekend? That rotation we saw?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure who else you'd put in at this point. I think that's the best way to go with it. And, you know, these next 2 midweeks especially, you have really challenging games, and, you know, having Jarvis Evans, somebody you feel like you can trust here these next 2 weeks in those games, I think is a big deal, because those are going to be important when it comes tournament time for South Carolina too. So, you know, I think you leave that there, and then depending on how well he pitches, these next 2 weeks in the midweek, you know, maybe you look at making some adjustments at that point. But, you know, you're right. I mean, those 3 starters, to include Dylan Eskew, they all battled, and Brandon Stone left, you know, with 5 runs allowed, 4 given up in the first inning. But, you know, when those guys left the game, I mean, South Carolina was in position to win, or at least have a chance to win. And the what is supposed to be the best part of the pitching staff is supposed to be the depth and the ability to match up. But at the end of the day, you've had two series against top flight opponents in Clemson and Oklahoma, and those guys just haven't executed out of the bullpen.
John, obviously, the key to the game happened in the ninth. You're sitting there, bird's eye view of it, the plays with the middle infield. Take everybody through it. Your thoughts on what happened and how it kind of came apart.
Yeah, I mean, it was a disappointing play initially from Henry Kazmir to lose that ground ball. First of all, none of these plays were like necessarily routine. They were all hard hit balls. At the same time, like if they make the play, you don't sit there and say, "Oh, tremendous play by Henry Kazmir, tremendous play by Jordan Caron." There are plays that you would expect your scholarship SEC shortstop and second baseman to make, and they just didn't. That was a play that Kazmir's made 100 times. The ball was given a hit for whatever reason. I thought it was an error, but it doesn't matter. The guy got on base, and then carry on. He's back playing in shallow right field on that ground ball with the shift, and he's right there. He's made every play this season. I mean, he's been so good and made a couple of great plays in that game and just took it off the chest. And I think he had to have been thinking about that when Kazmir got that very next ground ball, and he wasn't covering the second base bag, and Oklahoma's going to beat you if you hesitate on a throw. They're going to beat that throw out to first base. And when Kazmir looked over to second, I mean, he didn't have any time to get the guy at first, and it was a couple of physical errors and a mental error that ended that inning.
Yeah, how about Oklahoma? Assess Oklahoma. A lot of people are calling them middle of the road SEC, which is fine. Middle of the road SEC teams also go to Omaha, but Carolina was neck and neck with them all weekend. Assess what you saw from the Sooners.
Yeah, I mean, they're talented they've got so much top end talent on the pitching staff is incredible. I mean, I don't think they threw a guy out there that was throwing less than 93 miles an hour. South Carolina threw about 3 guys out there who were throwing 93 miles an hour. I mean, the upside and some of the ability on that pitching staff is incredible, and they built their team kind of like Kentucky in some ways. Very athletic, very fast. They'll run, they'll steal bases, and that puts a lot of pressure on the pitching staff. It puts a lot of pressure on the catcher. I thought Talmadge did a phenomenal job this past weekend. And I think that's overlooked a little bit. Those guys were averaging 3 steals a game. Coming into this, they had 2 steals all weekend, got thrown out 3 times. And a lot of credit goes to the pitching staff for that too. But they did a great job managing the run game. It's not like that Oklahoma didn't have guys on base. They had guys on base all weekend. So, great job in managing that. But it's a tough, challenging team to play against. And, I thought South Carolina in a lot of ways, measured up to it and really should have come out of that series against a top 15 opponent with 2 wins.
It's an offense that obviously has had some ups and it's had some downs and some inconsistencies throughout the year. And, mostly they've been perceived more in a negative light than a positive light, but they did hit 336 as a team this weekend, John, against that pitching staff you just talked about. I know they had to have there was a few moments, obviously at the end of the game yesterday where you felt like, one hit, they're going to come back and win this thing, and a couple more throughout the weekend. But overall, they had a pretty good weekend. I mean, you think about Evan Stone's triple yesterday. That was a clutch moment there. I mean, they had they had a better weekend than I think I was anticipating that they would have. Where do you think this group is now that they've gotten through about 20 plus games? Do they feel like they have more answers than questions, or where are we?
Well, I think you're getting there, and I like I mentioned earlier, I was really encouraged about some of the things that this team was doing offensively, and you started to see some out of Talmadge, but you started to see some out of Henry Casimir too. I mean, the bottom of the order in general came through. They were 14 of 36 for the weekend, hit 389 with 9 runs scored. You scored 21 runs this weekend, and 9 of them came from your bottom 3 guys in the order. What does that mean? It means they're getting on base and, giving Nathan Hall an opportunity to drive him in, and, whoever was hitting in the 2-hole on a given day to drive him in, and Ethan Petrie behind them to drive him in. Those guys did a phenomenal job. And, I didn't think that South Carolina was going to have a whole lot of thump in the batting order, and right now that's looking to be true. But I thought that there was a chance for there to be some length in the order. I thought that the bottom third of the order might be able to give you some production this year, and it started to look that way a little bit this past weekend. So I think that's certainly a very encouraging sign.
John, I'm pretty confident I know the answer on this one and where you'll go with this, but let me just throw out a question from chat row from Cam. He asked, do we not recruit guys with plus velocity as much as other SEC programs, or are we just not landing them? Seems like other teams in our league have way more arms with plus velo than we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. It's something that, I've wondered about too. I mean, there's some young guys who have a little bit more velocity than some of the older guys. You've taken some in-state guys who maybe don't have quite the power, who are older. You've missed on high school guys. You've had to go out, and because you haven't. I mean, South Carolina's done a horrible job of recruiting high school pitchers. Not, I won't say the last couple of years, but prior. South Carolina from a high school pitching standpoint has not done a good job in general. I think that started to change a little bit, and we're seeing a couple of guys, whether it's a Tyler Pitzer or Eli Jerzenbeck or a Zach Russell or Ryder Garino. They've gotten a little bit better, but you haven't landed guys. And then so you go to the junior college ranks, and those guys are going into the draft, and you had a 96-mile-an-hour lefty, in Brandon Clark, who was signed to come play. There was the Matt Duffy kid who ended up signing with the Red Sox. Like, those guys are going pro. So if you're not able to recruit the guys out of high school, Jake McCoy, obviously another guy who's a power arm lefty, who's a sophomore, but they're getting a little bit better. But you've got to land some of these guys out of high school, and they just haven't done a great job of doing that, because it's hard to add 4 and 5 miles an hour to a fastball. By the time you get to college.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, everybody's recruiting the same guys. Like, they all want the guy who throws 96. Whether or not you land them, that's another story. But it's not like it's a philosophy of, well, let's just try the more crafty guys with less velo, because our kind of philosophy is velo is overrated. I've never heard that coming out of South Carolina camp, regardless of who the coach was.
Right, and there's other factors at play too, like how many pitching coaches has South Carolina had here lately? Like, it's, I mean, you got Terry Rooney now. You had Matt Williams the year before. You've had Justin Parker. You've had Skylar Meade. Like, the pitching coaches are turning over, and that has an impact on things too. But you're right. I mean, you're not. In high school, recruiting happens so early too. Whether it's freshman or sophomore year of high school, like, you have to project some things too. You're not throwing 97 as a freshman.
Right.
Yeah, there's projection that happens too, and sometimes your projections are just off. But South Carolina does have a few hard throwers coming up through the mix, and they need to keep on keeping on with that.
They limited Oklahoma offensively this weekend to just 236 batting average, which is really good. The problem is they put 22 guys on base via the walk. John, and I mentioned just a little while ago, 3 of those 6 who reached via base on ball from the 7th through the 9th scored yesterday, and that was a difference in the game. They got to get that corrected. I mean, that's got to be a point of emphasis. You got a very good hitting Cougars team tomorrow night at Segra Park. They go to Arkansas. Arkansas historically, you and I've wondered about this for years. why in the world do they not hit better? But they are swinging it this year. And then you got North Carolina and Tennessee. All these teams just mash. And if you give them free bases, that's a bad recipe. So they're gonna have to figure something out. And I don't know what the answer is, but they got to figure something out. Am I missing anything there?
No, and to your point, like Oklahoma coming into this weekend was bottom third of the SEC in most offensive categories. Like if you give Tennessee all these walks and all these opportunities, they're gonna beat the crap out of you. Like they're not gonna fail to come through in some of these situations. If you do that against Arkansas, who put up 30 runs this past weekend against Ole Miss, like on the road, they're not gonna let you slide. It's great to have Tyler Pitzer throw up a 0 in the earned run column against Oklahoma over 4 innings or whatever it was. But he walked 5 guys. He was playing with fire the whole time, and a team who hits bottom third in the league may not take advantage of it, but some of these other teams are. Dylan Eskew can't walk 4 guys and hit 3 more. Like you just can't do that. Like you're living dangerously. Is one thing to be able to do it against Morehead State or even Oklahoma, but when you start facing some of these teams that are known offensively for what they can do swinging the bat, they're going to take advantage of every free opportunity you give them. And the 5 you give up on Saturday, pitching around however many walks it was, 5 for Pitzer and 3 for McCoy, and those are going to turn into runs really quickly.
They're going to have to steal one somewhere, guys. Losing that one this weekend, they got to steal a series somewhere. Maybe it happens this weekend in Fayetteville.
Can I throw one other one out there? Because I know a lot of other people have asked this too. I want to get John's thoughts. This is from Bruin. With Maneri only under contract 3 years and being 67, do you think that will possibly hurt recruiting high school kids and talent? I know he might coach 10 years, but just curious.
That's a great question, and I don't have a great answer for it. I mean, I think it probably does impact a little bit, but for some people. But like I said, with high school recruiting, so much of it happens so early. No, that's changing a little bit. It's getting a little bit later, but it's still happening with guys who are in freshmen, sophomores in high school. Obviously recruiting's changing in general with portal and now revenue sharing or NIL or whatever. So, your teams are getting a lot older. So I don't know that I don't know that has a tremendous impact on it. They're hardly recruiting high school kids right now. It feels like in general.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much that impacts.
I'll just offer my 2 cents on that. For me, there's no better coach in this league, and I know a lot of coaches share this opinion, and there hasn't been a better coach in this league than Dave Van Horn at Arkansas. He's 64.
Right. He's
still recruiting at a high level. So Paul Maneri's won more national championship than Dave Van Horn has. I think once you get your solid footing with the program, but in year 1, nobody was going to come in here and just like poach everybody's top players and get a bunch of top-notch recruits. I don't know if age is going to be a overriding factor why kids don't choose South Carolina. I think Paul Maneri has enough cachet to still get big-time players to Columbia.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. And then, this past year, I think we talked about this last week or maybe the week before. You came in at a time where so many guys had already made decisions too. So,
Right.
You missed out on folks in this past portal cycle, and certainly you weren't getting high school kids at that time. So, it's just part of it. But like you said, so many of these kids are going to be making decisions based on who the coach is right now. And Paul Maneri's got a pretty darn good name, a pretty darn good resume. So those guys who you're recruiting who are going to be immediate impact guys, those guys are going to be fine with Paul Maneri.
Well, if I've learned anything about college baseball from being in the thick of it to just being around it, kids want to go to good programs, and sometimes coaches change, but their decisions don't. Some do, but it's not like football where it all falls off a cliff and everybody runs out to other programs. It's a little bit different in baseball. So we'll see. You know what can solve this? Just win. If they go to Arkansas next weekend and win 2 of 3, all these conversations turn into something totally different. We'll see. I'll be anxious to see how they kind of stack that to try to steal a road series in a very difficult place to play, Fayetteville, Arkansas. But first, tomorrow night, 6:30, the College of Charleston comes to town. They will play at Segra Park. We're expecting Jarvis Evans to get the ball for the Gamecocks. And also, the Cougs got rained out on Sunday. So there's a chance maybe that they throw Daniel Brooks tomorrow, potentially. At least maybe even a predetermined split, John, to get him in the game. He'll have to pitch next weekend for Holbrook. I haven't talked to Chad about it, but they might see the big righty for the Cougs.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if he goes out there and, throws 30 or 40 pitches. And, heck, if things are going well for him, maybe you keep riding them. I don't know what they got this upcoming weekend, but, maybe you keep him out there and see if he can beat the Gamecocks and get him back into the rotation the following week. I don't know. It's certainly plausible. The Cougs are a pretty good baseball team. And, they've had times where they've given up a few runs, but they've had times where they've scored plenty. So, it's going to be a challenge for South Carolina tomorrow night for sure.
All right. Shifting gears to the hardwood here. We'll keep it close to home. The decision to not play in the NIT for the men's program, Lamont Paris, of course, did issue a statement last night, and he mentioned attrition on the roster with injuries. They decided it was best to not participate this year. What's going on here?
I mean, I think there's a heck of a lot of factors at play, and that's the one I guess they decided to highlight most.
Well said, John. Well said.
That's why I asked what's going on here.
Excuse me.
John would make a great press secretary with that answer.
But Colin is banged up, and if they were saddling up to play an NCAA tournament game, then by golly, he'd have been out there ready to rock. But they would have had to play tomorrow. They told the players last week that they had the weekend off and to be back Monday. Obviously, that's something that could change, but it's not something that they wanted to change. So at the end of the day, this is where things are. But more than a dozen teams, opted out of playing in the NIT this year. South Carolina was far from the only one, and it just there's 3 ACC schools playing in it. There's one from the Big 12. The rest are all mid-majors. So, South Carolina is not the outlier here.
LSU backed out too.
Yeah. What on
I'm sorry. I'm just going to interject on one thing. They want to get cracking on the portal. Like they don't want a second dedicated to anything else than improving that roster right now. I get it that some fans are a little disappointed. Like, why not just give it a run? But I also understand the bigger goal right now is how do we turn this thing around?
Yeah. How much?
The NIT's a long. If you make a run, which Carolina has several times, as we all know, that's like a 3-week deal. Mm-hmm. You're not. You don't just. It's not like playing a bowl game. You are constantly on the road playing games, game after game, going until all the way to the Final Four, which is right around the same time as the actual Final Four. So that is time that you're not on the recruiting path necessarily. You're not making phone calls that you need to and doing things you need to improve that roster, which they drastically need to do. So I get it.
Yeah, and what if you have to fly out to California and you lose to Santa Clara, and I don't even know if they're in the tournament or even have a basketball team, but
where Steve Nash played. Come on now.
Who knows? It may have been contracted, but that doesn't do you any good either. At some point you just kind of are what you are. I don't know that that going out and playing one of those games and losing is the best look either. You were very competitive in the SEC this year. You go out there and tell these guys who you're recruiting from the portal, listen, man, we were really close. We need a guy just like you to help change, some of those 7 5-point losses into 5-point wins. And if you go out and, lose to Texas El Paso like that, I think becomes a harder sell.
Fair enough. How much attrition are we expecting on this roster?
That's a great question. There's going to have to be at least a few to be able to bring in some guys who you need from the portal. So there's going to have to be some guys who come off but I don't know who they're going to be. I could sit here and make a case for every player on the roster to have a spot on next year's roster. Or I can make a case for basically everybody on this past year's roster to not have a spot on next year's. Like it's going to come down to first and foremost what the player wants to do. If the player wants to leave, you can't make him stay. But it's going to come down a lot to, what the coaching staff wants to do, who they feel like they can make better, who they feel like they can improve, who they feel like is engaged in the program and wants to be successful here next year. And I don't have all the exact answers for that right now, but I think at least 3 guys are probably going to have to transfer out.
Well, we're expecting 3. Obviously, their eligibility is done. You're talking about Wright, Jamari Thomas, and old BBV, who's whatever he does in life, he's going to be incredibly successful.
Get paid in Chicago as a big-time lawyer.
Yeah, he doesn't need basketball to make things work. I think John, it's fair to say maybe a lot of the conversation will center around the futures of Nick Pringle and Miles Stute. If Stute can get an extra year, does he return to South Carolina? He said openly that he wants to. Is that reciprocated on the Gamecocks end? And then obviously Nick Pringle and whatever he decides to do, right? Those are 2 major pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Those 2 guys, and I think both of those guys would be welcome back if they choose to come back, or if Stute gets cleared. It's a roster cap of 15 next year, so he can have 15 scholarships, but that means no walk-ons. So, I think that's probably the end of it for Weston Coggeshall and Lance Piper. I don't think you're going to scholarship those 2 guys, so that opens up a couple of spots. But yeah, there's still some things to figure out in terms of players' intentions and NCAA clearinghouse and things of that nature.
All right, you're going to be at the press conference 12:30 today.
Shane Beamer's talking, right? So
does a one-legged duck swim circles, John?
Yeah, well, Hale and Alex will certainly be there. I'm going to try to get over there. We'll see. I'll be tuned in regardless. It's a busy time right now. It's a busy time right now for sure. So I've forgotten that this even started today. For some reason, I was thinking it was next week. But we were talking in the baseball press conference. Somebody said, "Oh, I'll see you tomorrow." What? Okay. So,
John, I think the nation and particularly the national bird watching community wants to know, I know you're in the nest right now, but we haven't heard one single chirp throughout this entire segment. Did you kick the baby birds out of the nest? Is there a disciplinary thing going on here? Did somebody break the rules of the Whittle household? What's going on? Because we're a little concerned about the baby birds that you're normally joined with.
Well, I've got a couple of dogs, and both of those dogs are pretty athletic and can jump, and they may have pretty fast. So I don't know. No, I hear a couple of birds chirping right now, but you're right. They aren't quite as close by as usual.
Yeah, you're not feeding them the worms in the middle of the interview, which we've come accustomed to, which I think is ratings gold, quite frankly. But we'll see if we can bring them back next week.
Next time we'll get them back next Monday.
All right. I know we got to get you out of here, so we're throwing you on the spot. John Whittle's Final Four consists of whom?
I haven't even looked at a bracket.
Oh, come on. Well, that's the point of being on the spot. You got to name for it. You got a name for it.
Well, I don't know if they're playing each other.
Name a team that you like to win it all. How about that?
Florida for sure. Give me Florida. Give me Auburn.
Okay.
They're not. Are they in? They're not.
Nope.
They can't.
No,
they
no.
couldn't be in the same
They're
bracket.
both 1 seeds.
Well,
yeah.
they could play in the Final Four.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I said Final Four, so he's good with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just go. I don't know.
You got Houston is the 1, Tennessee is the 2 in one bracket, Bama is the 2, Duke is the 1 in the other.
When you were a kid, did you play capture the?
Yeah, is he healthy? We'll go ahead and we'll go with Duke and Tennessee. Let's go ahead and put three SEC teams in there.
Fair enough. That's going to be part of our cut bet segment coming up here in just a second. Also,
Okay, yeah, I've clearly done my research. All y'all pick your brackets based on what I had to say.
John Whittle loves to drive. Are you driving to Fayetteville?
No Fayetteville trip for me.
Okay.
No Fayetteville trip for me. I might head over to Beckham Field and see what Ashley Chastain and the ladies have against the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Wonderful weekend for them against Georgia. We're going to hit on some of that in hour 2 as well. John, thank you for all you do. There needs to be more John Whittles in the world, especially for everything you got to cover right now. At least 4 of them.
Exactly.
Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate you guys. Good talking to you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
man. There
John.
you go. John Whittle.